Hi, I'm Snez, personal trainer, healthy lifestyle coach, and your guide to feeling your best. This podcast is a segment from my weekly radio show, Wellbeing Wednesdays, broadcast live on 88.6 Plenty Valley FM. It's all about sharing real, practical tips to help you move more, eat better, and live healthier without the overwhelm. Let's dive in, shall we? Now, this next segment actually came from a conversation that I had just this last week with a young guy who's 24 and who I've been working with for a number of years around fitness and nutrition. And he's 24 now. I've known and been working with him on his nutrition probably from about 14, 15, 16, around about that age. And back then, the focus was about helping him to gain weight for football training. So he was wanting to build muscle. We also needed to add some body fat to protect him on the field because he was just so lean, and supporting his body amongst his training to grow into a stronger body as his body was naturally growing. And we did that slowly. We were very calculated in terms of the recommendation. It was very sensible. And basically for him, it translated into just eating a lot more food. And I remember he was like, oh my goodness, I'm taking bags, like supermarket bags of food to school. But moving on now, fast forward to now, he's 24, he's working full time. His role has become quite sedentary. He's finished off uni. He's off at the moment. Footy season is off. Just come back from Christmas holidays. There was a lot more social events. He has a partner, there's parties, and all that usual life stuff has started happening for him, which also the fact that he's getting older. And when I saw him last week, he casually mentioned that he feels like he's gaining weight. And then half joking, I think, and also pretty much just to test my reaction, he said, I think I'll just go to one meal a day and I'm going to go and just eat chicken, broccoli and rice, and that's it. Plain, simple, that's what I'm going to do. And I was like, absolutely not. We are not doing that. That's not how we solve this problem. And I very calmly said, why don't you just go back to healthy eating? Like, he's just such a good eater. Like, he was always eating veg and fruit and protein, and he, steered away from the traditional things that teens of his age would put in, like Coca-Cola and soft drinks and chocolate and chips and all of those sort of fast takeaway options. So I just sort of said, just go back to what you were doing. And he replied with something that really stuck with me, and that's why I've decided to present it today in today's segment. But he actually just said, Snez, I actually know how to put on weight, but when it comes to losing the weight, I don't actually know what to do. And it was very honest. And I just thought, well, this is so valid. And it's so true. Like, it's easy when you're a young person, your metabolism's through the roof, and just eat more and, hit and miss whether it's a good option or a bad option. As long as it's more, it's going to contribute to the end result, which was getting thicker and getting stronger, putting on some muscle mass, but also just putting on body fat because he was so low, like a lot of boys at that age can be, especially when they're doing large amounts of training, such as, if they're training for footy. So it was such an honest response and so valid. And a lot of people know how to add food in, especially if we're just thinking about ourselves as women or men as adults. We know what we did wrong. If we've over-consumed, that's really easy to do. But very few people know how to adjust without moving into extremes like the idea that he presented to me. So today I just wanted to unpack this, and especially for young men who are getting a lot of their information online, and there is way too much bro science. And some of the things that I'm seeing on TikTok and Instagram, because I have 3 boys, so I'm always seeing this information front and center. And some of the things that I'm hearing and seeing is just like, no, we are not going there. But firstly, just wanted to, before we unpack what we need to be doing, I think the most important thing was to, firstly, I asked him the question about how does he actually know that he's gained weight? Like, is he feeling it in his clothes? And more importantly, what kind of weight actually is it? So in his case, he's 22, he's still growing into his body, and young men naturally add muscle mass into their mid-20s as their testosterone levels increase. Their bone density increases, and there's muscle maturity that continues to develop as they move into their mid-20s. And their bodies can naturally thicken as they get older, and it's something that can be a lot easier to do than when they were 14 and 15 and 16. And this is something that I've seen with my eldest son, who's 22, and he's of recent times been doing a scan himself and just checking in. He's like, oh, Mum, I've gained muscle mass. I didn't even, haven't even been going to the gym in the last month type of thing. And he's like, oh, but I'm smashing the protein. So it's interesting because that change is happening naturally. And on top of that, before that he was quite lean, but he was also very low body fat, which was actually affecting his performance in a negative way. So adding a bit of body fat in this particular situation actually could contribute to positive performance, but it could be quite protective in footy and not the problem that he was thinking it was causing. So I firstly encouraged him to get a scan first and just get a really good understanding of, well, what have you actually put on? Let's get a good understanding of that first. And then the second thing I think that's really important is what I wanted to be very clear on is firstly, in the process of trying to make this change and trying to lose some body fat, if he has put on some and it is making him uncomfortable for the training, or, if it is, his body fat levels are moving into the unhealthy range, for example. We haven't done the scan, so I don't know what the results are. But in the event of that, and we are wanting to shift some body fat, the one thing that we're not going to do is we're not going to go online and find some extreme restrictive diets that are cutting out meals, going to the one meal a day, especially for people of that age group. It's probably not helpful. I know there is a lot of information, in particular for men out there, going to the one meal a day, and there has been some research that has shown that men, especially in their 30s, 40s, 50s, they can benefit from that. But this is a bit of a different situation where we've got these younger guys. But definitely mono food diets, where we're just eating the one food group or the one meal repeatedly, or shredding phases. Like all of these approaches, they're really hard on gut health. They're very, very disruptive to the hormones, and they will almost always backfire when they come off that diet. Because that was the other question that I asked. It was like, okay, so if you are going to do this one meal a day, what's going to happen eventually over time? And he was basically, well, I'll just lose the weight, I'll just shed the body fat, and then I'll just go back to whatever I was doing. And I said, well, that's kind of the problem there in and of itself. If you go back to what you're currently doing, you're only going to end up where you are and worse off. So the body doesn't respond well to extremes. I think that is the most important thing to understand. And the fact that we don't even need to do these extreme changes to see a result, especially when you've come out of a period of knowing quite consciously that you're overdoing it with, holiday eating, overeating, a change in work environment, extra alcohol, like all of those things that sometimes can be a temporary situation. We don't need to go to the complete opposite extreme to try and remedy some of those changes. So then we're looking at, well, what are we going to do? So the first step, I think, is just let's have a look at all the healthy habits, make sure that everything is in place, because things like sleep, for example, that was the first thing that I would address. Sleep, and the reason being is that we do have irregular sleep patterns when we've moved into new work or when we're coming out of holidays and that type of thing, and going out more, and even with the longer days in summer, it means more irregular eating. So the first thing is let's get that sleep under control and the recovery under control firstly, because poor sleep drives our hunger, it drives our cravings, and it increases fat storage. So getting back to a sleep routine initially and on its own can shift body composition surprisingly fast because it does actually impact the choices that we are making. Then the second thing is, again, we're keeping the basics. We're going to look at hydration, making sure that we are drinking enough water, because some of that weight gain, especially if we've been on holidays and not eating our general, healthy diets, then some of that weight gain can actually be water retention, especially if we're eating more processed and salty foods. So that is definitely going to help. And then also hydrating is going to help with appetite and making better choices if we're not feeling dehydrated. And then the third thing, we're going to just remove any of the obvious extras. So things such as alcohol, just like cut it out. If it's something that you generally don't do in your day-to-day, then get rid of it. Soft drinks, if that's crept in, well, let it creep back out. Excess takeaway, start to get back into planning meals, things like that. Any ice creams, any mindless snacking, like they're all the things that they can go. And it's not just forever, but let's just tidy up for a period of time, or let's just reduce the intake of some of these foods that are the extras that you're not normally having. But we can just sort of, bring them back to the sometime category rather than having them on a day-to-day basis. And then we're going to go back into our regular meals. So we're not going to go into one meal a day, but instead think about not skipping meals and, as we mentioned, no extremes. So with guys of that age bracket, they do get very hungry and they do need regular nutrients to keep them feeling satisfied, but also not to get too hungry or hangry, because then the ability to monitor what we're consuming to make healthier choices and to stop when we've just had enough becomes really, really difficult when we are extremely hungry, especially young guys. So let's move back into 5 meals a day, make them very simple, make them very repeatable. Make sure that each of the meals is built around protein, some form of vegetables or fruit, depending on what meal it is, making sure that we are getting healthy fats. I find young guys tend to consume a lot of the unhealthy fats, but when it comes to consuming healthy fats, like my youngest who's almost 16, we're talking about healthy fats, and he's like, I just hate nuts and seeds. Or actually, nuts is not too bad. It's like the whole seed thing, he just can't quite get his head around. So definitely increasing some healthy fats and then making sure that we are including a form of whole grain carbohydrate as well and getting that fibre in to support digestion. So eating until satisfied is really important, and we can only do that when we don't allow ourselves to get too hungry, and making sure that we do stop when we just feel satisfied and not over full. Because when he was, this guy in particular, when he was intentionally trying to increase muscle mass and gain weight, we were trying to intentionally eat past fullness. So it was that eating to a little bit of discomfort, or, that bulking, whatever it is. But the point is that we don't want to overconsume until we feel sick, but it's that sort of feeling that, okay, well, like I've more than had enough. And remembering that signal takes time, so eating nice and slowly. But when we're trying to shift body fat and we're trying to reduce our body fat, what we want to aim for is not that feeling of fullness. We want to aim for a feeling of 80% full. So you're satisfied. You could definitely have more, but we want to make sure that we are stopping at 80%. So we're reducing some of that calorie intake and that intake of food, which is going to help to shift some of that body fat. And so what we want to aim for is that when we are eating until 80% full, we want to make sure that by the next meal, which is going to be 3 to 4 hours later, because we are aiming for the 5 meals, which is breakfast, snack, lunch, snack, and dinner, then we definitely want to be aiming to feel hungry again. So we want that food to run out before the next meal. So if you're eating your 5 meals a day and you've had lunch and the afternoon snack time comes around and you're not hungry, in fact, you're not even hungry for dinner, then that's telling you that was way, way too much. The hunger is important. We need to be able to sit in hunger for a short period of time, sort of 20 minutes to 15 to 20 minutes. It tells us that the body is drawing on stored energy, so we want to experience that. So I think that's really important. We can't sit in hunger for too many hours by eating that one meal a day, but definitely we should be feeling hunger in preparation for the next meal. And then the last thing is to make sure that we are avoiding eating after dinner, not as a rule, because if you're training late, for example, then you may need that extra snack, but we want to make sure that's just another way to allow the body to tap in some of those fat stores overnight, that if we stop after our main meal at night time. The training, that's going to vary depending on what you're doing, but definitely getting back into 3 or 4 strength training sessions a week and 1 to 2 cardio sessions is going to be really helpful to kind of achieve these goals. And it is his age at that, that mid-20s age with a naturally high metabolism. Once things are tidied up, his body fat will come off quickly. He's not going to have to do anything different or extreme at all. I've been chatting about how a young guy of 24 can make some changes to his diet if he is trying to lose weight, especially if he's been quite accustomed to, as a younger person in his late teens, wanting to gain body fat and muscle mass, and then how it does change as they get older. So going to unpack now a typical day of food for a 24-year-old guy that's going to support fat loss, muscle retention, and then just support them to have the energy in their lives, whether they're studying or working. So the goal is to make sure that we're having enough protein and carbohydrates throughout the day. So for breakfast, we're going to start with 2 to 3 eggs, scrambled or boiled, 1 to 2 slices of whole grain toast, and then they can have some cooked spinach and mushrooms or tomato or avocado to make a really filling breakfast, simple and basic. So protein earlier in the day is going to help to control their appetite, and the carbs are going to help to fuel them. So making sure that we have that combination. Or another combination, a sweet version of that would be some yogurt, protein powder. The grain would be Wheat Bix, and I'm sharing this because this is what my son's doing at the moment. He's making himself like a cheesecake Wheat Bix, where the Wheat Bix are mixed with an almond milk and the protein powder. And then he's layering that with yogurt and peanut butter and then putting some raspberries on it, and he absolutely loves it. So that's leaving it overnight to enjoy the next day. So they're 2 options. The morning snack, we need to have that combination of protein plus fibre and healthy fats. So something like Greek yogurt's really simple. Fruit, you can either put the yogurt in a container and put your fruit over the top and then sprinkle it with some nuts and seeds, or you can have a little container of yogurt, eat a banana separately, and then just a handful of nuts. Very, very simple and basic. The next one is lunch. So lunch needs to be satisfying. So we need to have the protein element of it. So whether that's chicken or beef mince or fish, then have some sort of a large salad. It could be just a salad mix with avocado. It could be capsicum, tomato, cucumber, grated carrot, or it could be just cooked veggies where they've got broccoli, carrot, capsicum. It could be stir-fry veg from the night before or some roast vegetables. But if you are going to have sweet potato or potato, make sure that you also get a variety of colours. So some green and some red through capsicum and that sort of thing. Then you need the carbohydrate component. So that could be a packet of the rice. It could be some quinoa or potatoes. Or you could put all of that together in a wrap. You could definitely put grilled chicken with some salad veggies and put it in a wrap. And then if you are having the salad, put some tahini oil, or you could some olive oil or some tahini dressing over it. But it's going to be satisfying. It's very simple to grill up some chicken, have the store-bought, even cooked rice with a mix of salad or cooked veggies from the night before. So very simple and easy. The afternoon snack, it's really easy to do a protein shake here, or some cottage cheese with fruit, some boiled eggs with some crackers and some carrot sticks. It could be tuna and crackers. It could be hummus and some veggie sticks and biscuits, for example. Very simple and easy. And this is a really important snack to have because it can prevent overeating at dinner because you're sort of arriving absolutely starving. So really quite important. And then dinner, again, we're looking at that combination of protein and veg with lighter carbs. So you might go some sort of a grilled fish or some steak or chicken or again mince, some roast or steamed veggies, a serving of a side salad, and then some potatoes or rice with that as well. So after dinner, as I mentioned, we want to discontinue any snacking. If you feel that you are hungry or if you have had a training session, then it's super simple just to shake up another protein shake if you didn't have it in the afternoon or for brekkie, or just having some yogurt with some fruit and some nuts and then just sort of calling it a night, closing off the kitchen. But you can see it is super simple to put together a healthy day of food, making sure that we are getting, as I mentioned at the start, enough sleep, making sure we're getting enough water to keep ourselves hydrated, and making sure that we are eating till 80% full so that we are hungry again in preparation for the next meal. So the biggest thing that I guess that I want anyone listening out there to get is that those bulking and shredding cycles, they may look impressive online, but they're really hard on your body and they're unnecessary, especially for long-term results and long-term health as well. So instead, just finding food that supports your training, your energy levels, and just eating whole foods, getting that proper combination of protein, veg, and carbohydrate and healthy fats. You don't need extremes to achieve a particular goal, and we don't need to achieve this goal quickly. So yes, you may have left yourself short before footy training season is back on, or, the pre-training component starts the pre-season training, but try to leave yourself that little bit of extra time. But just know that if you're going to do it in a slow, gradual, sustainable way, then you're going to continue that way and you won't have to then deal with the potential weight gain when you come off the super strict diet. So give that a go and just take it one step at a time, but just remembering that you do need to definitely get a good assessment of where you are at the beginning of your journey before you start to make the changes, so that you can then document and get some real quality feedback on the changes that you are making. Thanks for joining me on this segment from Wellbeing Wednesdays, as heard live on 88.6 Plenty Valley FM. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with someone who might find it helpful and subscribe so you never miss a show. Want to catch the live broadcast? Well, you can tune in Wednesdays from 12 till 2 p.m. on 88.6 Plenty Valley FM, or find my info on Wellbeing Wednesdays with Snez, the Facebook group. Take care, stay healthy, and remember, it's the little choices every day that create big changes. Talk soon.